What is? I am your host, the Working Class Guru. I am your host, the Working Class Guru. Look at this thing here today. I am your host, the Working Class Guru, here today to talk to you about one of the biggest questions. What is wage slavery? Now, wage slavery is let me get into that in a little bit here. I just wanted to bring up my little intro. I'm the Working Class Guru. For those of you who don't know me, I talk about the traditions of the working class people, the struggle, the given cycles of business and marketing, etc., how we can realize and actualize ourselves in a system that otherwise exploits us, alienates us from our labor, draws surplus value on us, and turns our bodies into commodities to be brought to the employment market. So today, let's talk about what is wage slavery. Well, wage slavery, it's kind of a difficult thing to bring up. It's kind of a sore topic around people for some people at most, because it implies a given corporate slavery to your day-to-day meanderings. And people, it's technically very unpopular nowadays, so I've heard, to be a slave or to talk about slavery or to mention it. And yet, there are certain places in the world that still employ slavery. For one, in Pakistan, there are people that find debtors that go into debt, and they're basically, instead of always having to pay that debt off, essentially by working for the people who have given them that debt. It's almost indentured servitude that they're put into, but it's a perpetual indentured servitude, and it's also tied with physical harm and just degradation, being literally kept down. In general, then that is sort of like an indentured servitude. An indenture basically ties a person in debt to a given person, and in which your labor will be traded to pay down that debt. And a chattel slave is a slave who is actually owned all outright in whole. You're born into that position. Your body is nothing more than just a commodity, a asset to the employer, your master. You're basically just you're as good as an oxen. You're just a human chattel is what you are. And that's what we saw back in the Roman period. The Roman times had chattel. The Helot population of ancient Sparta was chattel. And of course, the one that everybody knows most that is portrayed the most is the American. What happened in the American South under the antebellum South, and the ideals of slavery for the plantation, which was also horrendous. And we always assume that slavery is this horrendous thing, and that just because we're living in sort of a bubble, we can't possibly be slaves. And so that's why people are abrasive to it. Yet, the term wage slave is actually pejorative, if you haven't noticed. And it comes from the peoples that were being transferred from, that were being sort of taken out of their relatively rural land holdings, farms, and moved into these city centers during the Industrial Revolutions. And it was only meant to be temporary, in order to make a little bit of a living, in order to eventually buy land and become, quote unquote, a free and independent person, became a perpetual system that people were consistently getting drawn into the factories and becoming nothing more than just a tool towards this ever growing need for profit over people. And wage slavery was actually used by the Republican Party at one point as a general slogan. If you're nothing more than just a wage slave, we will end wage slavery, etc., etc. And there was this sense of republicanism among people, and it was a gross defacement of their general values to be rudimentarily regimented under these sovereign shackles of the corporate hierarchy for them. And the idea was that, the old American ideal was freedom and independence, And yet this was a gross effacement to those old values. But as time grew on, people became accustomed to it. They came to expect it. And those old viewpoints as employment, as people fought for, labor unions were able to fight for better wages, better conditions, not having to work in horrific circumstances. The suing for peace helped to reform a little bit of the system, and people got careless, and people became just used to it and accustomed to it, and eventually what we have today is the modern employment institution. It still is, no matter how you look at it, no matter how you could ever redefine it, it's constantly at the center of it is the idea of simply this, is that you're renting your body, which is you're made up of your flesh and blood, into a system. You're giving it to a master, essentially, to do what he or she will with it, to create these ends. And remember that the idea is that we exchange value for value. That's the basic tenets of the exchange system, right? Well, the thing is that when you have two people, okay, let's say you have one person who owns a factory, and this factory, for him, he has machines, he has employees, he has a sawmill, etc., and he has all these factors working towards creating for him one thing, and that's an income, okay? He owns a capital product, commodity producing thing. That's how he connects to the market, okay? Because the market is the thing that holds everybody's communal necessities for life, their subsistence. We no longer go to the forest. We no longer farm our own potatoes and yada yada yada, do our own livestock. Instead, we go to the market to gain those necessities for life, subsistence. Okay, we have the one guy who brings his commodities to the market, and he gets a income from it. And we have this next person. They own no industrialized machinery to create and generate an income. All they own is one thing: their bodies. Okay, that's the working class. That's the working class. And the only thing they have to sell to get the stuff for subsistence is their work, their labor power. And so what do? They have to go to the person who owns these means of production and say, "Hey, I got nothing. I want to sell you something. I need some money, but why don't got nothing?" So the rich guy sits back like this and says, "Well, you know what you do got? You got your body, and you've got you. You've got your brain, you've got your guts, you've got everything that you've got one human being." And the guy's like, "Well, isn't that slavery, Not well, I mean, you can come in for 8 hours a day. I won't work you in the fields for over 12 hours a day, because in the old system, you could work a slave for however you wanted, right? But the thing is instead of getting the subsistence directly from the capitalist, which would be more like slavery, instead of getting your home, your home and everything else, they did this in the mining communities. They would, instead of getting a wage that was in sort of monetary, you would get a credit. You would get these basic little tokens, miners' tokens. If you look them up, miners' tokens were exchanged to the miners in these communities where the mining companies held monopolies over the entirety. It was a closed system of the entirety of the camp, over the general store, over the housing, and the only way you would go and you would never get exchanged actual monies for your labor. You would only get these mining tokens, and when you'd leave the little mines, these monopolies, these small little monopolies, your money be worthless. We don't take these miner tokens here. So you're basically relegated to only selling. It's a perpetual cycle, and that is essentially what wage slavery is. But instead of it really changing, I mean, that was really disgusting what those old mining companies would do in giving miners tokens. But essentially, what is the difference now? It's just a larger pool of miners tokens, except that we just call it money, and it perpetually keeps people in this everlasting cycle of selling their labor. I think it's a terrible effacement of our values of freedom. I don't think it's horrible. I think that there's a lot of things keeping people from being exploited terribly in the modern employment system, and people want it. People want it because it's what they're used to. It can be changed. It can be reformed. But wage slavery is a form of continuously keeping the working class people in a perpetual state of servitude to the owners of the means of productions. That's essentially all it is. And because what happens in this system, what happens when you go to a job, where when you sell your body to an employer, he literally controls your day-to-day. He or she controls what you are to do. On that day, what time you're supposed to wake up, what time you're supposed to be at work, when you're allowed to take your break, when you're allowed to, what you're supposed to say, what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to dress, how you're going to carry yourself at work, and what your obligations and priorities are going to be for that day are all laid out to you by another person. A different person is deciding that for you. You don't necessarily have a choice in these matters either, because like I've stated before, this is the idea of exploitation, is now that we have these desires within our body, these necessities, these survival mechanisms, not only that tell us to go out and get food and get subsistence, but also to be socialized, to be a part of a community, to be a part of a system. No man is an island. You've heard that. No man is an island. People are social animals. And all of these things are taken into perspective and then used against you in order to keep you perpetuating in this given system that does nothing. It's not an exchange for value for value. Isn't that what we were promised? You were promised to be in the free market. Your value will be exchanged for value. What the market determines value to be. No. Nope. Sorry, not for you, not for the wage slave, because the idea is that a capitalist needs to make a profit off of you. You'll never be paid what you're worth, because if you're paid what you're worth, there'll be no profit left over, because there needs to be a surplus value that's created on your body. So what you create doesn't belong to you; it belongs to the guy who owns the company. Exactly. I think everything is evil. I think there's a lot of evil in the world in general, and this system it's kind of crappy to be subject to it. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna sit here and cherry coat it for you. I mean, it's nice to be a part of a first world and to be able to have access to a lot of the good things that come with that. I am grateful and privileged to be a part of the working class in a first world country. God forbid. I thank God. But at the same, I'm not going to cherry coat it. It is what it is. It's essentially slavery. It's a better form of slavery. It's a more just form of slavery, but it's not freedom. Don't mix two and two together here. Okay, it's not freedom, and don't tell me it is. I don't have any way to get out of it. You don't have any way to get out of it. Tell me one way you can get out. You can try to compete and become one of the capitalists. You could try to, and then you can effectively have your own servants to do your bidding for that machine that creates you income. You could go on welfare, but you might not qualify for welfare. You have to be, be handicapped. You got to be really sick in the head. Or I don't know. It's hard to qualify for welfare too. And I mean, if you don't already have land, you can't farm. You're gonna need to pay taxes on that land anyway. And so you could farm, and you're gonna have to. I guess you could. You could be self-employed. Try to be self-employed, but that's not how system works. It's not set up for everybody to be self-employed, right? It has to be some people up here making money off the people down here. So that's how it works. All right. I am your host, the Working Class Guru. That's just my general definition of wage slavery. And if you have any questions, just write it down in the comments. Like me and subscribe to me. Help me to sustain this channel. Thank you. done. You know what? I think I'm done. I don't think I can do anymore. I think I'm fucking done.